Now, the ninth edition of the annual Africa Wealth Report projects a 65% rise in the continent's millionaire population over the next 10 years. As things currently stand, Africa's big five wealth markets, South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and Morocco, house more than half of the continent's millionaires and over 90% of its billionaires. Dominic Volek, who's a group head of private clients at Henley and Partners, which has collaborated the New World Wealth Report, produces this report and also joins us now to unpack it. Dominic, thank you for your time and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Beautiful. Let's talk about the Africa Wealth Report. Maybe why you collate this data, Dominic, the purpose of the report.
Yeah, so we look at the private wealth populations across the African continent and also the movements of those populations, what we refer to as millionaire migration. So we are strong believers that private wealth held within a country, by individuals that live in that country is a better indicator of the financial health of a country rather than something like GDP, which is a relatively static measure and doesn't really move much year on year. We also are very much involved in what's known as the investment migration industry. And this is all about assisting governments to create residence and citizenship by investment programs in order to attract these high net worth individuals together with their capital and skills and talent. And so here we see a big opportunity in Africa.
Let's talk about then that $2.5 trillion worth of investable wealth sitting on the continent. Help us put that into context, maybe comparing to prior periods, and also maybe trying to figure out who these wealthy individuals are and where they're concentrated.
Yeah, so here we're talking about $2.5 trillion of liquid investable wealth. So we analyze individuals and their sort of personal cash holdings, debt-free residential properties, stock market holdings, and then we break that down into three cohorts. So we look at the number of millionaires, which currently on the African continent sits at 135,200. So these are high net worth individuals with liquid investable wealth of at least $1 million US. Then we have centimillionaires, of which there are 342 on the continent with net investable wealth of at least $100 million. And then we have currently $21 billionaires that are living on the African continent.
I'll also ask you here about then what we have seen in terms of just market conditions on the continent when we think of the performance of stock markets as well as currencies here. How has that, played into the number of wealthy individuals that we're speaking about, and even in how wealth has moved in and around the continent?
Yeah, so Africa still presents a significant opportunity for wealth creation, across various sectors. But in terms of wealth preservation, things like currency depreciation and the performance of the stock markets is where that can be eroded. So if you take South Africa as an example, the rand has depreciated against the dollar by about 43% over the last 10 years. Other notable depreciations, we've recently seen significant movements in the Naira in Nigeria, but Zimbabwe and other countries have seen their local currencies depreciate as much as over 75% over the last decade. And when you look at the stock markets, the all-share index in South Africa, which holds more than half of all corporate holdings on the African continent, although that has risen over the last decade in local currency terms, it's also down 5% against the US dollar. So this erosion of wealth means that these high net worth individuals look to diversify their assets abroad as well. And here we see some movements. And in terms of those movements, the millionaires themselves also relocate. So over the last 10 years, we've seen about 18,700 millionaires leave the continent. If we come back to that earlier number I mentioned of 21 billionaires that are currently resident in Africa, Africa actually has 54 dollar billionaires that were born on the continent, but only 21 of them still remain there.
Dominic, when they leave the continent, where do they go?
They're going to markets where they see better business opportunities, of course, better lifestyle opportunities, and where, potentially they can become more tax efficient in terms of their own wealth planning. So the US has for a very long time been a destination, as is Europe, places like Switzerland and Monaco, particularly for centimillionaires, Singapore. And more recently, we've seen a significant inflow into the Middle East, and particularly the UAE and Dubai, of course, is right up there in terms of a very popular destination that offers, very interesting tax incentives. There is no income tax. They've only just recently introduced a relatively modest corporate tax rate. But then also from a lifestyle perspective, access to education, healthcare, this is what these individuals are looking for.
And of course, we are expecting the next 10 years that more millionaires will emerge from the continent. Dominic, where will they emerge from? And do we know, what kind of investments they would have made to emerge as millionaires?
Yeah, so if we look at it on a country-by-country basis, you mentioned the big five, at the start of your talk, focusing on South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and Morocco. The top three there, South Africa, Egypt, and Nigeria, have actually seen a decrease in their millionaire populations over the last decade. But it's a different story in places like Kenya and Morocco, and sitting just outside the top five is Mauritius. So there we anticipate significant increases, some of the fastest growing millionaire populations globally. Mauritius particularly, we expect an 87% increase there. Again, Mauritius offering a lot of those lifestyle and tax benefits that millionaires are interested in. And from a sector perspective, it's everything from, your typical mining and agriculture that has always been a significant area where wealthy people have created their wealth, but also new industries like fintech and edutech and agri-tech are also very much up and coming on the continent.
And then, of course, I just want to focus a little bit on South Africa and the realities here. Of course, you've said that we're one of those countries that are losing our millionaires here. Do we know why people are choosing to leave South Africa? We are supposed to have these deeply developed financial, systems. Our banks work well, and things work relatively well here.
Yeah, look, it's worth mentioning that there is still, millionaires coming into South Africa from the rest of the continent. So within the African continent, there's about 1,600 millionaires that have migrated across the continent over the last 10 years. South Africa, again, still offers significant opportunities, but of course it also has certain challenges, as do a lot of countries. So while there is a sort of a net outflow out of certain places, if you look at South Africa itself, although Johannesburg has for a very long time held the top spot of the wealthiest city in Africa, we estimate that by 2030, Cape Town will take that crown, currently seeing probably a 20% increase in its population of millionaires over the coming years.
Brilliant, Dominic. Very fascinating insights from this report. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. That was Dominic Volek. He's a group head of private clients at Henley and Partners.